The Human Rights Commission has appealed to communities across the country to refrain from taking the law into their own hands. It's condemned violence in recent weeks directed at foreign nationals and the destruction of property. In the latest incident, more than 20 foreign-owned shops were looted in Atteridgeville and surrounding areas in Pretoria on Monday night. Locals went on the rampage targeting Spaza shops. They accused foreign nationals of drug peddling and stealing their jobs. 3 people were arrested and charged for business robbery. The latest wave of violence comes ahead of a planned community march on Friday. A large police presence remains in the area. We are now joined in studio by spokesperson of the South African Human Rights Commission, Gershwell Brooks, to talk more on the xenophobic violence in Atteridgeville and Rosettenville. Gershwell, thank you so much for joining us. Now, can you qualify this type of behavior as xenophobic, or is it not just violence?
Good evening. I think there's a couple of things that we need to think about here. So the communities have come out and they've made it clear that they're concerned about crime within their areas, right? Ranging from sex trade to drug trade and a whole bunch of other things, which one understands. And of course, the community also extends it by saying that, look, they have reported these issues to police, but the police have not been sufficiently intervening on their behalf, which we can also understand. However, what the concern is that whatever action the community is taking has 2 problems with it. First of all, it's not due process. This is not, affording an accused the opportunity to state their case. This is a community taking action through their own means. That's the first problem. And we can see the violence that, that has played out over the last couple of weeks. Second to that, the issue is that it seems to be targeted specifically at foreign nationals. So then how does one then remove the notion of xenophobia under those circumstances? Because surely I think that any reasonable person would understand that crime is a societal issue. So no matter what your race, no matter what your gender, no matter what your social origins are, you could be committing a crime. You could be subject to crime. So that is what the main concern is on behalf of the South African Human Rights Commission.
Now, let's speak about the issue of the police not being able to do enough to ensure that they react or respond to South African people's complaints or the community's complaints, for instance, in Rosettenville and in Atteridgeville. What's the reasoning behind them not responding within what is seen as due time or enough time to ensure that they do something about the crimes that are reported?
Look, I pretty much know as much as anyone else that's been reading and following the media on this particular one. The community is coming out and the community leaders are claiming that, look, the police aren't doing enough because the police are in cahoots with these criminals or these criminal elements that the community have identified. But what we're saying is that it's not as if the community have no options whatsoever. There are other means of being able to sort this issue out then. If you have a concern with police corruption, I mean, you know for a fact that the media gets approached with this type of thing regularly, where there's a sting operation of sorts from the media, where the media intervenes and actually takes this matter forward and brings it to the attention of the relevant authorities. And you see massive overhauls happening. I mean, this happened in El Dorado Park 2 or 3 years ago with the lolly lounges issue. So my question to those communities is that I understand that there's fear. We understand that there are people that are held in the grip of crime, for example. But why is it that this community can't rally themselves and take the necessary action rather than getting together and, for example, committing acts of criminality themselves?
What's the reaction from the communities with what the Human Rights Commission is saying? Have you been able to engage with them, and what's their reaction to what you are saying as an organization?
Look, I think that as the South African Human Rights Commission, we need to take this matter further. And obviously our secretariat, the people that do the letter of the law, as they would say, the people that cross the T's and dot the I's in terms of the law, they need to look at this issue and take it forward and see how we're going to approach this. Because at this stage, the question that we have to ask ourselves is it just going to be a punitive thing, or is this going to be a mediatory process, or is it going to be a combination of both? Because those are the options that are availability. And obviously we also need to engage with communities. We have a presence throughout 9 provinces within communities, but we're only 214 people that need to service 55 million South Africans. So what we really need is the cooperation of communities under these circumstances to make sure that we can bring this type of xenophobia to an end, because it infringes on multiple human rights. And these human rights, as set out in Chapter 2 of our Constitution, extend to all who find themselves in South Africa.
Are we doing enough as a country
I think a lot more can be done. I think that we need to open up engagement, and I think we need to also be very honest and frank with ourselves. Can we possibly qualify and say that all criminal acts are committed by people who find their birth and their origins outside of South Africa? I think no. I think it's disingenuous. We have to be honest. We also contribute to the crime levels. If there's a drug trade, surely there are purchasers of those drugs. Similarly to, as well as if there's a sex trade, there are people that go there for those particular purposes, and many of them are South African. So I think that we need to be honest and deal with our own social issues first. And second to that, yes, if there is an issue of illegality, if there is a criminal issue, of course the community needs to act, but they need to act within the bounds of the law. And that is our message.
Now, Gershwell, what's the legal penalty for people to have found to have participated in xenophobic attacks or criminal acts within, for instance, Atteridgeville or Rosettenville? We've seen a lot of houses being burned, people being beaten up, and now it just seems to be escalating, where every couple of years we go through this situation in South Africa in different areas where it just flares up, as you mentioned earlier, El Dorado Park, Loli, and now KZN, Durban, the last time. So what do people understand that it's a criminal act, and what sort of penalties are then given to these people to ensure that other community members are aware and they go through the processes?
Look, I mean, our mandate is specifically taken from, we receive, our mandate is given to us by Chapter 9 of the Constitution. However, the rights that we protect is set out in Chapter 2 of the Constitution. So we really look at the human rights aspects, the rights that the Constitution provides. But luckily, I'm in a position to give you a bit of a breakdown of some of the charges these people are facing. And I think even your news report alluded to that. I mean, from robbery to common theft, to arson, to assault, to a whole bunch of other serious criminal charges that people are facing. But that is, of course, for the police to investigate and for the National Prosecuting Authority to investigate. And we don't confine our work to that. What we're concerned with are the fundamental human rights that are being infringed on. I'll give you one example. Section 9 of the Constitution gives us the right to equality, no matter what your birth, no matter what your social origin or your ethnicity, which means that our Constitution specifically makes it unlawful for people to discriminate against people of from other nationalities, or to be xenophobic in essence, to make it very simple.
Now, is it an issue of maybe communities not understanding what the Constitution is and what legal rights, whether foreign or South African born, it entitles any individual in the country?
I think the biggest concern in South Africa is that despite us having the world's greatest constitution, I think many South Africans are at odds with those very same rights that we extend. I mean, if you have to think about the treatment of women in this country, if you have to think about the treatment of the LGBTI community, if you look at the numerous incidents of, we just came out of last week, we had a national investigative hearing on racism via the social media. It's a massive problem. So I think that as South Africans, despite that we're 23 years into this new democracy of ours, 23 years has been quite some time. We're still at odds with many of the rights, and we're not too keen on, a lot of the time we're happy with the rights that we afforded, but we're not too happy in protecting the rights of others. And that is part of the dialogue that the South African Human Rights Commission wants to add.
Now let's speak about Joburg Mayor Herman Mashaba, who was somewhat blamed for the Rosettenville saga. How do we ensure that political leaders avoid crossing those boundaries where it becomes a situation where they get blamed for issues that they had no control over?
Well, I think, first of all, I have to put out a bit of a disclaimer. So the South African Human Rights Commission has been approached with a complaint about Mayor Herman Mashaba, and it is the subject of an active investigation. So obviously I can't go into the detail of that particular case. But I think that what we can say is that all political leaders, whether they're within communities, whether they're part of royal families, whether they're part of political parties, need to be cognizant of what they say and what messages they put out into communities. Because how those messages then in turn are interpreted is of concern. Because all too often we find that someone will say that I made an innocuous, innocent comment. And then after that we see protests and we see people getting injured in the process. I mean, years back we had a radio DJ at a community radio station claiming that one or the other pastor was a witch. A protest broke out, and a security guard that was coming from work, minding his own business, not even aware of what was going on, was shot dead. And these are the consequences of the utterances of people. And that is really the issue that people need to become cognizant of.
Now, very quickly, Gershwell, the South African Human Rights Commission, you mentioned the fact that you've only got 214 people who service the whole country. How do you manage, and what needs to happen for the South African Human Rights Commission to get more people and to get more footing on the ground? Because clearly there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of understanding the Constitution for South Africans or foreign nationals who are in the country and understanding their rights going forward.
Well, maybe my appeal would be that the very same people that are organizing their communities into these marches and into some of these activities that we've seen can maybe approach the South African Human Rights Commission or give us the opportunity to engage with them so that they become advocates on our behalf, rather spread the message of and the protection and provide the protection that the Constitution provides, as opposed to taking action that A, is not going to solve your problem on a permanent level, and second, will cause us far more problems and trouble than needed. Because I think that we can agree that as a result of these actions, people are going to face criminal indictments. They're going to look at all kinds of other difficulties in their lives.
Gershwell, thank you so much for joining us.
It was only a pleasure.
And that was Gershwell Brooks from the South African Human Rights Commission joining us in studio.